Well, welcome. I imagine that some other folks are going to join us, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. Uh, through these last 8 years, 9 years, one of the themes that's followed through for me is uh, really, are we really doing the emperor's new clothes? I read that as a kid and I thought I would never see it come to life. And I realized that as a whole, as a collective, that we've been living out of stories. We've been giving life to stories. Humans have been giving life to stories for centuries. And I think one of the things we forget is that we've made them up. We we make up these stories and then we act as if they've always been here, that they're part of the planet. And even, the planet hasn't always been here, but stories, the stories that we don't challenge, like us versus them, like the rugged individual, like original sin. Even as a kid, I would say, what is this? You mean people are just inherently bad? And that if you work hard for something that somebody else tells you, you can feel better after you're dead. I mean, if you just look at the stories, if you imagined that you were, a an alien, and then I don't mean someone from another country, I mean an actual extraterrestrial, and you came and you looked at some of our stories, well, I think you'd either be falling down laughing or you would go, oh dear, I think it's time to move on to another planet. This one just is not is not doing very well. And in my life, when I started really seeing that what I was experiencing had a lot to do with what I was making up, that was really a turning point for me to be able to create, to co-create, and also to generate new stories. And I think I was thinking about, and I'd like you invite you to think about, what are the most prevalent old stories that you've been acting out of and reacting out of. As we're going along, I'd like you to just see, oh, yeah, I recognize that story. Oh, that's how I've been playing that one out. And so the story for me, I have a lifelong story of being number two, because in my family, I not only was number two, but I was always, my older brother was always referred to as number one. So I was always number two. So the disparity in power, of having power over rather than power with, that's another story that we play with. And so one of the things that a whole group of us have been playing with, and many of them are on this call. If you want to just go like this, some of our Cultivating New Stories folks are on this call. We've been generating a possibility of a new framework for humans to relate. And we've been at this for a couple of years, really looking at what are the most familiar old stories that are kind of running things right now, and what are the possibilities of shifting those. And so we're in the middle of creating a year-long course that we're calling Cultivating New Stories for Humanity. And the possibility is generating a whole new fuel source. Much of our planet right now operates on adrenaline. So the stories serve to get everybody agitated, but you get that hit of adrenaline, that, it's either the, oh, I'm right, or it's the, oh my God, but it's all adrenaline. And then you get that big spike of adrenaline, which feels as if you're alive. And then it fades off again. So adrenaline is a short acting, non-renewable drug. And the chemical companies have been trying to generate something that's more powerful and more addictive than adrenaline, and so far have not been able to, but they're working at it. And so that adrenaline, I think one of our basic mistakes as humans is we're substituting adrenaline for aliveness. The sense of adrenaline and that kind of, agitation that you get, but it has some fuel in it, and so you can kind of move forward, and then it drops off, and then so you have that up and down experience that leads to what we call the upper limit problem, that you're feeling like, oh, I'm doing great, and then you crash, and then you have to dig out of that, and then that becomes the story, is what goes up must come down. Don't feel too full of yourself, because as my mother would say, just wait. And, so for a long time I go, for what? Okay, I'm waiting, but for what? But the whole sense was just wait, because if you're feeling good now, you're absolutely going to feel bad later. And, so the whole story of, life is hard. In relationships are inherently about compromising. So, have your fun now, because if you get into a close relationship, and especially if you get married, it's all over. So we're surrounded and moving through our stories about life all the time. We make choices out of old stories. We make choices out of whether we can believe someone's story or not. And then we build trust. And then what happens if someone breaks that trust? What happens to the story? One of the big stories, the upper limit story, I was just mentioning this to someone the other day, that some of the newest Netflix shows, like particularly The Lincoln Lawyer, the most current season, and ends with the most spectacular upper limit example. So I don't want to do a spoiler for any of you who want to watch it, but it really pissed me off, because it's, again, you feel really good, and then of course you can't feel that good. So I think that's one of the biggest old stories, is you cannot feel good. We're going to make sure that you don't believe or act out of or create a story that life can go well, that life could be easy, that relationships could be fulfilling. So our bias is definitely toward uh-oh and look out. And that makes perfect sense evolutionarily, because we've come from lots of skills about dealing with stress, and not so many about the people who were sitting around looking at the flowers, and then the next tribe got them, or the animals got them. So we don't come from flower children ancestors. We come from people who were able to meet the threat and look for the threat and be aware that life is temporary and you're never safe. And that old story, in my opinion, is deeply embedded in ourselves. And I think it's only, also, if you look just in terms of centuries, we've only had a few hundred years where we could consider other possibilities, because until then it's really all been about survival, and for much of the world it is still very much about survival. So we have that story going on of, we may be doing well, but they're not doing well, and what are we going to do about that? And so that's a whole other, but I want you to see that all of these are stories that we've been generating about making meaning of our lives, and making meaning of the the journey of each of our lives. We have a very good friend whose name is Ron, who is a veteran, and we've worked with him for many years. He's just a kick butt consultant, and he also led some of the landmark activities that we did many, many years ago. And one of the things that really came through to me from him, because I was just appreciating him yesterday and just heard back from him, was truly understanding that life is empty and meaningless. And then in the face of that it doesn't mean that there is a bad meaning. It means that life is inherently empty and meaningless. And then it's up to you to generate your stories. So there are lots of stories to pick from, but our group, our cultivating group, has generated some new possibilities of replacing old stories with new stories. And so I wanted to share um, first what we're up to for the year, and then give you some examples of the old story and the new story that we're going to be playing with. So, and while I'm talking about this, if you have a question or something that you wanted to know more about, just make a note of it, because I'll have time for us to talk about that after I've shared a few things with you. So what we're wanting to do when we start this, which is going to be sometime early next year, where we're still kind of waiting for the wave, after the election, we're sort of a little whoa. So when we get our sea legs again, we'll see when we're going to start this. So each month we're going to focus on a different topic and a different viewpoint, a different context that allows for maximum co-creativity, easy presence, the nourishment of connection. And they're not necessarily things that you would find in a school curriculum, but we want to devote a whole month to each of them with activities, ways for you to interact with your community. Because here's one of the big differences in how we've been doing life, and a shift that I think is going to be essential for our well-being and our survival, which is basically the old story of the rugged individual, and that you're basically on your own and you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And if you succeed, it's because of you. And then way over on the other end of that continuum, more in Eastern societies, um, the collective takes far more precedence over the individual. And so, like in China, the policy of one child that was just decided for the whole collective, and people either complied with that or they got into some kind of trouble. So the the problem with the rugged individual is that we're not getting the nourishment of connection, and we have no practice in power with. We have a lot of practice in power over and in making people other than you. And one of the big ways we do this, I'd say probably the biggest old story that's still operating, is that life is fearful, and you should be afraid all the time. And that's been very, very prevalent, in the last 9 or 10 years. And, my sense is that it's the main old story that needs to get shifted so that we have a new fuel source, because fear and adrenaline are just, pretty much the same. And what adrenaline does is wear you out. And if you look around, like I know so many people who are sick, and so many people who have had just recently, sort of post-pandemic, have gotten sick. And my sense is that we don't know how to metabolize the adrenaline. We don't know how to shift from that. So one of our first, or in the first few months of what we're going to be doing next year, we're going to take a look at shifting from fear to presence and how to be able to do that. And so that's one of the big stories. So I'd like you to just take a moment and consider, how much do you think that your life and your decisions, your choices, are being run by fear right now? I mean, just to, whatever kind of criteria you want to use to take a look at that. And even from over, I can tell so that a whole bunch of you stopped breathing when I asked that. So that, just what were you thinking about when I asked you about that? So there are two really big problems with fear that I don't think a lot of people understand. The whole story of other people are scary. So if I'm scared, you're going to look like the enemy. And I'm not even aware that you look like the enemy because I'm not anymore in my prefrontal cortex where I can solve problems. I've gone back into my reptilian brain, and you, enemy, me, right, you, enemy. And that all goes on under the surface. So there's actually no possibility of the rich connection, the sense of that we're all in it together, that would allow us to welcome other people, include other viewpoints, give attention to each other in rich ways. So that's one of the big things that we're going to be taking a look at, which is shifting from I'm by myself to relational skills, a new story of what I've been calling presence, connect, play, and shifting from fear into presence, and then from presence opening up to connecting and receiving a new fuel source, which is the fuel of connection, the fuel of giving and receiving attention, of giving and receiving appreciation, of just giving and receiving being together. That is, and then from that, we have a new kind of collaboration, which I'm calling play. Because one of the old stories, you can just check this out for you. One of the old stories is life is hard work. You have to work hard to get ahead. The whole, you must work. And what we know is that actually play is more effective than work. When you play, and just take a moment. Well, first of all, let yourself consider your story about work, and your relationship to work, and the story of work in your life. Like, for example, I have to work hard, but I just never kind of get ahead. Or I work hard, but other people who don't work hard seem to just, they seem to do really well. How come I have to work so hard? And so just note, what are some of your old stories about work? Or I work harder than other people, and I just wish other people knew how to work. I mean, everything's kind of going to hell here because nobody else knows how to do an honest day's work anymore. So whatever, things that we have heard, things that will come in through social media, about work. And also take a moment to notice how you experience that in your body. So what's it like to be a hard worker? To have a story about life has to be about hard work. So for me, I immediately start feeling that in my shoulders. I start feeling like I'm carrying a lot, and I can feel a kind of a little bit of a collapsing in me, but then I will myself up into that. So then I start feeling tension in my back, and I'm going to kind of push through things, and then my whole back lights up, and then I kind of come forward and then my chin comes out, and then I start getting more interested in how hard other people are working. You're not working as hard as I am. And then I can get into that na of a power struggle where I get some adrenaline. But there's no connection, there's no fuel for me in that hard worker. And so even from my number 2 persona and working harder, I realized that actually the story about the squeaky wheel was more effective in my family. My brothers were the squeaky wheels, and they always got more attention. And then because I was just doing such a good job, nobody thought anything was wrong and nobody paid any attention to me. So it wasn't a very good attention strategy for me, but it did allow me to, really work well and work hard and, achieve things. So what are some of your stories about play? Play is okay for kids, but I mean, and it's a story that's creating a lot of havoc right now because education almost has no play in it anymore. So even for young kids, they're having to learn by, sitting primarily and not interacting with each other and being up in their heads. And so what are some of your stories about play? It's only in your free time. when you get to be an adult, you can't play anymore. And if you are playing, it means you're not really, you're not to be taken seriously as an adult. And we shouldn't give you anything powerful to do because all you do is play. so, so, when we started diving into these, it was like opening Pandora's box and all of these stories fly out. And if we could entertain them as stories, that would be wonderful. It could, we could be entertaining ourselves and trying out different possibilities. But some of those stories we've made real for a long time. Oh, I appreciate somebody's writing in, for only children play. So if you have some other stories about play and about work and you want to put them in the chat, that would be great. So people can share some of your stories. So what I'm up to in the next year is exploring a template. Now, I don't expect that the whole world is going to shift in the next year. I expected that about 10 days ago, but I'm letting go of that expectation. So Gay and I have what we call a 5-year and a 500-year plan. And cultivating new stories is part of our 500-year plan. So my intention is to create a template that is as comprehensive as we can make it about the possibilities of not only generating new stories, but being from those stories able to meet the unknown to generate new stories on an ongoing basis, so that we get nimble at being able to generate stories from an experience of wholeness, which is one of the topics, which is generating from integrity and practicing integrity skills. So each one of these topics is then going to go into a website, and the ending project of our year-long experience together will be this website that will then continue to exist. So all of the resources will become available, and they can be added to, and they can be specialized in different directions. Like, for example, if you're working with teenagers, if you're exploring with teenagers, what might you want to include from all of these different topics? If you're running into something about people not keeping their agreements, where could you go to get some resources? And this is primarily about new stories of our relational existence, in that we're all in it together. And so that's a big story. If we don't get that one, as Pachamama, there's a great Pachamama Alliance about it's an environmental organization that's really about befriending technology and ancient wisdom. And so in Pachamama, the whole idea, there's a little video that they have, which it has this little critter that runs around. If we don't get this, we're doomed. If we don't understand that we're all connected, we're doomed. But even in the face of we're doomed, people still have, an old story of, we're going to conquer the earth and the earth is just infinite. Or their story might be, we're going to get raptured up. And so let's just use up all of the resources because we're not going to need them because we're going to get raptured up. So, whenever there's an issue, I guarantee you that there's some messed up old story that's behind it that people treat as real. And then we also have old story competitions, like my old story is better than your old story. And a lot of the religious old stories, are about that, that my old story about, about God is better than your old story about God. And people have been creating wars about that for, for millennia. So we may be a warring mammal, and that may be more than a story. That might have its roots in our physiology, and my part of my 500-year story is that we move from fear into presence. We're able to see others as collaborators. We can use co-creating and play to meet the challenges and to meet the possibilities that are facing us now. So we will be having experiments that you can do with a partner, that you can do in your community. There'll be ways, there'll be handouts and different experiments that you can join. And you can also break off into smaller groups where you can work on a certain project that's really of interest to you. So part of our intention here is that we create a community that carries the news stories forward, and integrating the news stories into what you're passionate about, so that you have that support of collective wisdom, but also collective presence. Because one of the things I have found is that as we join together, our collective wisdom is much more powerful than each of us trying to do this on our own. And even when I was practicing as a therapist, there was a point where I thought, me working with one person at a time is really not very effective. And having people join together so that they're learning from each other is so much more effective. And so part of we have there's a big write-up about cultivating. It's on Hendricks.com. So, it's several pages with examples and also the titles of what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be focusing on. But what I wanted to do was to use some of our time to give you some examples of the topics and what the intention is, what my intention is at this point. I know others in the group have other intentions that they want to feed into each of our topics. But one of the key things is shifting from an old story to a new story. And also you'll learn how to shift from an old story to a new story, because people have been trying to do that from their heads. They've been trying to do that intellectually for a really long time. And as you might be able to see, not very effectively. So using body intelligence skills primarily to get really skillful at shifting, but oh, that's an old story. Even an old story that might have been, got you some adrenaline juice, but you finally realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. The biggest social construct that I think is an old story is what we call the drama triangle, the Karpman triangle that comes from way back in the 60s that we spent a lot of time playing with. And I think if you look anywhere in the world, it goes on between nations, goes on between organizations, it goes on between partners, and it goes on in communities. And that is the villain, the victim, the hero. How whenever there is some kind of a conflict, I look for how are people playing the triangle in this? And is it possible to step out of the triangle? So we have quite a bit of experience of assisting people to step out of the triangle and into new possibilities of generating wholeness. So take a moment to see how you are on the triangle one way or another about the election. So where are you? I've been heavily into villain, and then I went way into victim, and was going to not even do this course next year because why bother? It's all over. So that's part of my story. And like, wait a minute, we've been working so hard. What happened? So so take a moment and go, what are your old stories and where are you on the triangle? And I actually sort of developed an anti-hero. Fuck that. I'm not doing any more heroing. If they're not going to, nobody's going to take my recommendations. You're on your own. So I put a villain right on top and sat on my hero's head and went, bleh. So I invite you to also let yourself play with them, because let yourself express them, go out and rant around get your broomstick and throw it at the, get off my lawn, and you just let yourself play with it so that you're not keeping it inside, because this energy, I think it could definitely make you sick. So much better to find a friendly way to express it. And just like, because we're not in, it's not possible to problem solve just yet. We're all very much in our, limbic reptilian brains right now. So turning that into play, I think, is probably the most effective thing that you can do. So let me just pause for a moment and see if anybody has a question right now or anything that you'd like to share. You can just hold up your electronic hand and unmute yourself. Okay. Just wanted to make some space to see if anybody had. So I'm going to go through a few. Oh, we do. Oh, there's a hand. Yeah, Nancy, please.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
A question came to me. So I was wondering, how does the body accept it's okay to play then? Just curious about that. Like, how do we integrate, oh, it's okay to play. Here I am, 70 years old, and I've been working hard my whole life.
Well, what I've found is that play is in there. I think play, because the how our cells develop is by playing. They literally play with each other to develop us. So from a cellular level, we're basically, tossing and moving together, and we're playing. So what the image that came to me when you asked that is when animals, particularly animals that are cross species, want to play with each other, what they do is a little tilt. They tilt, so they expose their neck. See, it's a vulnerable move. Like, instead of, I'm protecting my neck and I'm going to, you're the enemy.
Like a flirtation or something.
If I tilt my head, it is an indication that I'm available for you to come closer to me. So what I would do is let yourself play with variations of the opening, and also there's the some will roll over now, and I don't know if you want to do that like at the grocery store, like,
Oh, that'll work.
but I love that, Michael.
He'll be calling 911.
Right, probably would. This we have some people seriously playing here in the aisle. So I've done things like, if I wanted to get gaze attention, I've come in and I've just laid on my back, just like what you were doing, Michael, but I was doing it, like asking for a flopsy. So when you're serious, so everybody just get serious for a moment, like get serious in your body, like serious and grown up. And then just notice how you do that. It's usually you narrow yourself somewhat and you get more structure. So what if you just, you did something, like a twist or a little shrug, or a tilt, and flirting is a subset of playing. So when I'm flirting, I have that, it's a play signal. So I'd like you to get curious, and you can do that with, and then just playing with something that you like to do and taking a little further, but doing something, making a choice that's not upright, a choice that's a little bit, where you're shifting so that you actually are going into play. You're going forward and backward or up and down, or, you're signaling that I'm not, on track here. I'm available for something different. And I found, even if I just do a little thing, so I might even like raise my eyebrow, I do this often with kids, because kids are one place you can learn that. When you're out in public, like when I used to travel much more than I do now, I'd be in the airport and I could always get some play going with any kids, because they would look at me and I just would kind of make a little face at them, and then they make a face back. We're going by on the escalators, and we're making faces at each other as we're going up down. It's just so that moment of taking the toss, and also letting people know you're available. Because when you're in fear, it's hard to let people know you're available.
Wonderful.
So in the moments where you have folks that you like to play with, that would be a great place for you to just open up to what your play signals are. Like my cat Greta has, when she wants to play, when she comes on me, she does this little arch and she sticks her paw out like this. She does that every time. She's sort of her little, here I'm coming now.
Such a
Ready or
lady.
not, here I come. So that's one of the great joys, is being curious about how can I signal my availability.
Mm,
I also find it is turning toward. So almost nobody out in public turns toward anybody else. So in the moment where you give your attention, there is that moment where there could be a little play that happens. And that play I find so nourishing. It's that moment of deep connection. We're regarding each other, we're recognizing each other. So that would be an example of something we might do as an experiment. We might, we're planning on experimenting with leading with appreciation.
mm,
So, like for a whole month, when you go out in public, that the first thing that you do is generate appreciation before you interact with other people. And we experiment and see what happens. But, what kinds of interactions are you able to generate? Do you feel more alive and more engaged? So, and that's some examples. But it's a great question for you to keep asking yourself. You know,
thank you. I
how can I
appreciate you.
generate play signal? Yeah, yeah. So
Thank you.
thanks. Great question. All right, so let's dive into a couple of these. So one topic, and these are all listed on the seminar page. So if you go to hendricks.com and you find Cultivating New Stories, in a big explanation, and there'll be more that's coming, but we don't want to we don't want to drown you. It's like when I was just having a breastfeeding example, but that might be TMI. I think I'll save that for a moment. So, freeing and expressing your essential self. So, what I've experienced, so the old story about relationship is hold something back, for God's sakes. Be a little mysterious, hold something in reserve. Don't just be wide open, for God's sakes. So, take a moment to tune into what your old stories are about relationship. And also, when you meet other people, I remember Chris Rock saying, when you meet someone, you're not really meeting them, you're meeting their representative. And so if part of the old story is keep things close to your vest, other people you don't know, don't talk to strangers, other people are not safe. And also, other people are not going to give you attention. We develop this armoring, we develop these roles that cover over our essential selves. And for me, the greatest joy of being in a deep relationship with Gay is that I can be completely myself. And as we're relating, I find more and more of my essence is emerging and flowering. And that it hasn't peaked, by the way, after 43 years. So those of you, part of the story might be, okay, well, it's going to dry off and, you're going to get bored and all that. No, that's very much old story. So finding and freeing your essential self is really about moving from original sin to you are an evolving work of art. So see if you would be willing to experience yourself as an evolving, unique work of art, and that your job is to keep sharing that, resonating with people in the world with your essential self. Because I've noticed that essence evokes essence, and that as I presence my essential self, other people resonate to that, and it is like a little signal. It's like fungi, all of the weave happens at kind of an underground level and then emerges with other people experiencing more and more of their essence. And so that is one of the 12 topics that we'll be playing with. Another one is opening to contact and being affected by others. And one of the old stories about that is you got to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, what people erroneously call personal responsibility, which is that basically you're on your own, which is so, I mean, it's just so not accurate. When you wake up in the morning before you get out of bed, I'd like you to look around and see all of the different elements of your life that are there because of other people, like electricity, and water, and windows, and food, and just even before you get out of bed. So the whole idea that I'm doing this all by myself is so impoverishing. The whole sense of we have a record number of people who are feeling lonely and isolated now, that are feeling out of contact and disconnected. And so the nourishment of connection is one of the most delicious experiences that you can have, of letting somebody else in. And the experience that can bring up a lot of fear for people, which is why we also have the fear module, because the structure of, okay, I'm in protection. So if I'm in protection, I'm in fear, and I'm just not open to growth and to change. And I keep my essence hidden. And I think one of the most tragic things in life is to go through all of your life without ever being affected by anybody else or letting other people affect you. And so we have all kinds of ideas of experiments for that. And a lot of our team have been creating different experiments for the group to play with during the year. And I'm really excited to see how that's all going to unfold. Oh, here's a big one: discerning what happened from the story. So a lot of us have our experience confused with an old story. And the old story, my favorite one, of course, is the Emperor's New Clothes, that we're living that out right now. And when I say that, people kind of go, oh, yeah. So I know that they're very much in the story. They don't see it. But I'm just sort of amazed that we're living out that, and people did it again. So I'm like, so that was part of my, now what? If people, how do we shift? So and then I realized, this is an ongoing study for me also. I realized that even doing that, is that a hero move? Is that really up to me? So right now, what I'm interested in is creating the possibility of new stories. And then people who resonate with that and want to play and want to join, welcome. But a long time ago, I realized how much I would try to bring people along, because, oh, if you could only just make this shift, just a little shift, everything would be so much better. That, I want you to know that that was like zero effective. It might have been in the minus numbers effective. So even if somebody is really stuck, they do not want to be heroed. I mean, at some very fundamental level. So I'm really, boy, I'm doing my best to release the old hero story, because that's where I would land most often, because I'm kind. I would land on the triangle in the hero position. So so to realize, again, speaking to our friend Ron, that life is empty and meaningless, that means I'm creating my story. And I'm going to now take responsibility for the stories that I'm generating, because I'm making them up. And my story is really about supporting people in finding and expressing their genius in the world, of people giving and receiving love and support. And that's the story I'm going to put my attention on. And my sense is that there's room for all kinds of stories, but I would like those stories to be chosen and not to be automatic or unconscious. So I think all the way along, we're going to be uncovering old stories that we've been living out of, and then gosh, how do we release those in favor of new stories? That's part of what we're going to be exploring together. And actually enjoying having more fun. I mean, it might sound very, very duh, but a lot of people are not willing to get their juice from having more fun. They want to get their juice from adrenaline and being against and being right. So, we call that, the Hershey bar. You're going for the Hershey bar, and it takes some cultivating to go for the apple rather than the Hershey bar. And so if you fall back into the Hershey bar, then that's going to happen too. That's going to be part of the journey. So one big module that we've done a lot of work on already. One of them is fear, but the other one is integrity. We have a bunch of materials about how to live your life in integrity. And I like the meaning of integrity that I found in a dictionary years ago, which is an unbroken totality or wholeness with nothing wanting. So integrity isn't about good and bad. It's not about morality. I find it's much more about alignment. Am I in alignment with the way that life is working so that actually life becomes easy? But when I'm moving against integrity principles, life becomes hard. So we have lots of materials on that. We have an integrity deck. We have a way that you can practice this every day. And one of my intentions is to have something that people who are really interested can practice every day, just for a short period of time, 10 or 15-minute practice. And then that builds over the year while we're adding in new topics. So we're kind of weaving the basket to hold all of the skills from the practice of integrity. And that integrity can be regained. It's not as if, you make a mistake, you go out of integrity and that's it, it's over. So the whole experience of realizing what it's like to live in integrity, after many years of practice in this, I can tell you that there's so many things that used to bug me that just have just disappeared. One, I don't worry. I just worrying. And I don't beat myself up. I have basically no self-critical voices at all. I can choose what I want to eat. I'm not in this big battle with myself about how I look. So a lot of the issues have just simply disappeared. And what's taken its place, when you live in integrity, the big benefit is that your intuition becomes a guide for you. And you cannot live from your intuition if you're not in integrity and you're living in fear. And so one of the big benefits from this, learning how to do this, is that you're going to get more and more of your own body wisdom, your own inner guidance, working in concert with all of the stuff that you know, so that you get that balance between your intellect and your magical dream making capability. So that's the power of integrity. And then choosing, well, I already talked about fear, but another one is choosing from a clear experience of yes and no. So this is the fundamental body intelligence wisdom that a lot of us didn't get when we were kids, and a lot of us had kind of acculturated out of us. Like, I don't really want that. Oh, yes, you do. Or, but I don't want to go. Oh, yes, you do. Or, oh, I really want that. No, you don't. So this isn't for you. You can't have this. So we get our own fundamental clarity really, really distorted. So finding what we call your whole body yes and your whole body no is an incredible power that allows you to make decisions much more effectively, because your body gets there before your intellect. Your body wisdom is actually faster. And so when you learn how to really incorporate that and learn that, you just become a much more effective, problem solver, but also just a much more effective chooser. Because one of my old stories was what I call, oh, sure. Someone would say, would you do this lecture for, and I go, oh, sure. Without, that was just from up here, like, oh, sure. Maybe I was getting a little bit of approval from them, or, oh, I get to be more famous or something. And then when it would come to the day before, something would happen that would take over my no. So I would get sick. Somebody around me, one of the kids would have an accident. So if you don't say no, your body will say it for you, and it can be kind of inconvenient, because one of the ways that we do that is by getting sick, or having accidents when you don't want to do something. And if you're not really listening to your whole body, yes, you won't step out into the unknown to really go after something that you really want, but may take a bit of a journey to get there. It's like, oh, I'm too scared to do that. And I actually conquered my fear of heights by some friends asked me if I wanted to go. This was back in '95. I was afraid of heights. I was very, very afraid of heights. And so some friends asked if I wanted to jump out of an airplane. And my body said yes. And my head said, no, absolutely not. We're not going to do that. But I did. I jumped out of an airplane, and I did a tandem dive, and it just cleared up all of my fears of heights, and and I did injure myself on the way down, and so I did deal with that. But even so, I had an experience I would never have had if I hadn't done that. For me, fear of heights to jumping out of an airplane. Now that's kind of a little miracle. So you can open up to all kinds of more joyful experiences in life by really listening to your inner yes and your inner no. And the only time I've gotten into trouble with clients is when I've overridden my no. So they're like, oh, could you please do that? Or, oh, it's really tempting. Oh, we'll pay you. And my body's going, no, no. There's a great Steve Martin scene in, I think it's All of Me, or no, it's The Man with Two Brains. And he's got this Black widow woman who wants to marry him, and she's seducing him. And he goes to ask the portrait of his dead wife if she should marry her. And the should I marry you back? And the picture starts spinning around and spinning around, and there's this no, no. And so he says, oh, I'm going to just take you off the wall and put you into the closet here. And so he puts it away. And said, of course, the rest of the movie, is the consequence of him not listening to his inner no. So part of the intention here is to have a good time with our exploration. So, even if the world looks like it's ending, there's still the possibility of beauty and connection and play in this moment. So one of the old stories is I have to get everything fixed before I can have a good time. So we'll be shifting that one as well. One of my favorite is being relentlessly, radically real. And this is about the inherent power of authenticity. Of authenticity to surprise you, of authenticity to open up new pathways, of authenticity to create a deeper connection with others. And so each one of these will have a set of ways to explore, experiments, reading, handouts, some of our material, other people's material that we've noticed that really bears on this. So you're going to have an abundance of resources. And so part of this is also to generate playmates for going forward in living in new stories, as we make this transition, which may last 500 years. But I want our materials to be part of the archives that are available to people who are choosing that particular path. So we have I'll just name some of the others. Listening with genuine appreciation. We have lots and lots of material on the power of appreciation. And I think it's one of the most underutilized skills. That I say it has the highest ROI of any skill that you could, if you're listening appreciatively, the return on that, in any kind of relationship is really, you really can't overestimate it. And then, reliably getting stuff done. So if you have great ideas and you have things you want to share with the world, but you cannot get it organized to, complete the agreements and get the thing going and complete the thing and the recommit when something goes off the rails and the printing didn't come out right. And getting stuff done, that's a whole skill that, most of us really didn't get any training in. We think we're supposed to just sort of ta-da, and it appears. Who was it Einstein or Edison that said something about, creation is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. So it's the perspiration that we'll be working with, is getting sweaty about getting stuff done, and also reliably getting stuff done. The people that I have closest to me are the people who I call count onable. They're, if they say they're going to do something, they do it. And it's not just about agreements, it's about the ability to get something done. So like I hand something off to Margaret and and she gets it done, and I asked Michelle, could you do this project? And I hand it off to her and she gets it done. And these are my count onables. And are you count onable? And you know how to do that. And so most of us could, I think, enjoy more skill in that area. And so we'll be looking at how we can play with that. And then also, the whole art of attention, giving and receiving attention. And by the way, I am giving a TEDx talk in Ojai in February, and it's going to be on the medicine of attention. So I'm very excited about that. And you'll be seeing more about that in social media. Oh, and another big one. See, I think I go, oh, that's a big one. And oh, that's a big one. So each one of them, we're going to kind of start it in like a dandelion. We're going to start it and send it out into the world, a month at a time. And then we'll see what we'll do after that. But another big one is dancing with contexts. So people, in my opinion, the person who controls the context controls the game. And if you just look at, the games that we have, sports is a really good place to look at. The context for football is so different than the context for baseball. And George Carlin did a great riff on the difference between baseball and football, which is also a contextual difference. Like there's baseball, there's you charge down the field and then you lunge and then you toss the ball. So there he plays with that difference. But you exist within lots of different contexts in your life. And playing with those and recognizing if are you generating this context, are you contributing to it, or are you at the effect of it? So I'm just seeing, I've written something I can't read. That's usually something I blame Gay for. So yes, changing thoughts, changing context by choice. So all of these skills, being able to dance with each other. So the big purpose is that you're able to meet life by generating and co-creating rather than being at the effect of. Because I think it's going to be a hairy ride here for some time. I don't know how long. And I have friends who think that, technology is going to solve the climate problem. They're not even thinking about it. So they just put that one. I'm not going to interact with that one. So the things that you're interested in, you can bring more generative power and more collective power. See, I really think the future is about co-creating, is about what happens between us. Not you do something and then I do something, but as we're playing together, a whole other thing gets generated. And I think that other thing has intelligence that we can allow to move through us. I just had the experience this weekend of doing some co-creating with one of our colleagues, Diana Chapman. We did a couples course. We did no preparation, and they came in, and we just started meeting with them, and we just started generating from and co-creating from what we were seeing and ideas that we had, and we created the whole weekend. And there was a third thing operating that the group noticed, like, like, how long have you all two been working together? How long did you prep for this? So that creative force, I think, has the power to shape the kind of world that we want to be living in. And that's what I'm interested in. So a short introduction to cultivating new stories for humanity. And cultivating, I love the word cultivating. I was looking that up, and it's to support the growth of. So, and I also like the sense that we're for me, cultivating is I'm getting my hands dirty. I love to get out in the garden and get my hands dirty and dig and smell the earth. And so it also has that component of we are co-creating with the earth as well. So that's it, folks. And it is 7:01. So I didn't realize that I was just wrapping it up here. But if you do have questions, feel free to send those off to Michelle, and we can address those. So thank you. Thank you for your attention. And if this is of interest to you, take a look, sign up, tell your friends about it. Because if you've got a group in your area that you can play with in person, that is going to be, I think, your biggest and your best playground. And so for people to play with in person, whether it's one person or, several other people or a group, that you share this with others, we'll be encouraging you to share the information so that other people can participate too. Yeah, so thank you so much. And until we meet again. Mwah.